So when Todd asked me to speak at chapel, he said, we're asking you to do a lesson on the book of Ruth, and he said, Ruth chapter 2. And even as we were talking on the phone, I said, oh great, that's that whole part of your God will be my God, and my God, or your people will be my people. And so after I hung up the phone, I opened up my Bible really quickly and looked, and I was disappointed because I realized that was Ruth 1. It was the end of Ruth 1, but it was still Ruth 1. Then I quickly read through Ruth 2 again, and then I got excited again because at least it wasn't the whole threshing floor business of Ruth chapter 3. So I thought, I can work with this. This is okay. We know from Ruth chapter 1 that Naomi and Ruth, of course Ruth is the daughter-in-law of Naomi, and they've returned to Bethlehem after being in Moab. They're in a precarious position. We understand this, right? They're single women trying to find their way in a man's world. When they return to Bethlehem, one of the things that Naomi says, this is what we deem a faithful woman, I believe. She says, don't call me Naomi any longer. Call me Mara, because the Lord has made my life very bitter. Let's hold on to that statement. Yesterday during our worship service over at the Leander Church of Christ, we had a woman that came forward at the invitation time. Her name was Linda, or is Linda, and she has Lyme disease that she received from a tick bite. She has that. She's had that for about 18 months, and she has that condition on top of many other health conditions. She's in a challenging place right now. But she came forward, not necessarily even asking for prayers for her health, but she came forward with an attitude of thanksgiving because of one of our members, Tom, who has built a relationship with her. They both live in the same apartment complex. Both of them are elderly folks. But she said of Tom that she can see the love of God in him as he interacts with her and as he talks with her. I'm not surprised. I know Tom well, and he is a man of great kindness. And so we know the story of Ruth is a story of hesed, right? Covenant faithfulness, or faithful love, or dealing kindly with one another. The story is dripping with it. And there's no doubt that the writer intended for the reader to be immersed in this covenant faithfulness, this faithful love, or the necessity of dealing kindly with one another. And so we see the kindness of Boaz in chapter 2. He allowed Ruth to glean in his field, getting plenty of grain for herself and Naomi. He told Ruth to help herself to some water. He spoke kindly to Ruth, showing her great care. Of course, at mealtime, Boaz gave Ruth an enormous amount of food. In fact, they had a doggy bag to take home, right? There's a first time for everything. We're told that she gathered an ephah. The daily ration for a hired laborer was a little more than 2 pounds of grain. Ruth gleaned 20 to 30 pounds of grain to take home for she and her mother-in-law. And then there's the kindness of Ruth. Again, back in chapter 1, that passage I already noted, your God will be my God, your people, my people. So we understand, we get a picture of Ruth's heart. She is a kind person, a selfless person, we may say. She told Naomi that she would go pick grain. This was a risky endeavor, and that's why Boaz's words of protection are so weighty. But we know that even with the kindness of Boaz, or the kindness of Ruth, the overarching hesed in this is the kindness of Yahweh. We get that, right? Boaz said in verse 12, may the Lord repay you for what you have done. May you be richly rewarded by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge. The kindness of Boaz is in truth the kindness of the Lord. Boaz is simply a channel of the Lord's hesed, the Lord's kindness. And then Ruth, and by extension Naomi, have found protection and security in that kindness. They found refuge underneath the wings of the Lord. And so upon Ruth returning home with all of that barley, we read this. I'd like to read it again, verses 19 and 20. Her mother-in-law asked her, "Where did you glean today? Where did you work? Blessed be the man who took notice of you." Then Ruth told her mother-in-law about the one at whose place she had been working. "The name of the man I worked with today is Boaz," she said. "The Lord bless him," Naomi said to her daughter-in-law. "He has not stopped showing his kindness to the living and the dead," she added. "That man is our close relative. He is one of our guardian redeemers." Notice the change here in Naomi's words, Naomi's mindset. Chapter 1, "The Lord has made my life bitter. No longer call me Naomi, but call me Mara." And now she's speaking words of blessing. "The Lord bless Boaz," she says. Was Naomi's life bitter? Perhaps, but God has not left her in that condition. Through the kindness of Ruth and Boaz, Naomi's life is changing. And so what we see in Naomi is that she is experiencing hesed, both from God and from others. This hesed, this kindness, has a transformative power in one's life. So you can see the situation changing for both Ruth and Naomi. Both were widows, and Ruth was a foreigner. But the overarching story here is the one of God's hesed, God's love, God's care. And so, as professors, as teachers of the faith, will your teaching and interaction with students continue to be a channel of God's hesed, His kindness, and faithful love to your students and others? And then students, as your theological education draws you closer to God and His kindness, will you allow His kindness to permeate all you do, whether it's in ministry or in everyday life? So Linda came forward yesterday. She came forward with her arms full. She was carrying an ephah of love, an ephah of joy, an ephah of purpose, and an ephah of grace. She received that blessing not from a man named Boaz, but from a man named Tom. Tom has been a channel of God's kindness, and it's made all the difference in Linda's life. Just like Boaz was a channel of God's kindness, it made all the difference in the lives of Ruth and Naomi. And we, too, can be a channel of God's blessing. Are you ready to do that? Are you willing to do that? I believe that's an exciting endeavor. Thank you.